Hello, welcome back to War Mysteries. I'm joined once again by Matt.
Hello.
I'm Jay. Anyone even vaguely familiar with the Soviet Union will be familiar with the name of Joseph Stalin, the dictator who held the USSR in a vice grip of terror and subjugation for more than 20 years, longer if you take into account his time as the General Secretary. Even after the death of Lenin, Stalin moved very quickly to fill the political vacuum that was left behind, to consolidate his power, eliminate his rivals, and, of course, dominate the USSR, securing his place as chairman of the Soviet Union. A hated and feared dictator, he died on the 5th of March 1953 of what was claimed to be a cerebral hemorrhage. Publicly, he was mourned, but obviously privately, people celebrated his death all over the world. Many hopeful that this would bring an end to the era of oppression that was blanketing the USSR at the time, but this of course would not come to pass until about 1991. The circumstances surrounding his final hours are still not clear, however. Evidence suggests that he may in fact have been assassinated by one of his inner circle. Was he murdered, and if so, by whom? In this episode we explore the unexplained death of Joseph Stalin. So, Joseph Stalin, what do you know about Joseph Stalin?
Russian president.
There he is.
He was the leader.
He was the premier of the Soviet Union.
It's a good picture. Did you draw that?
No. It's a picture of Stalin. Do you want to make it as big as normal? Acknowledgement.
It's good.
That's him. That's the boy. He's in about his late 50s there. He was 73 or 74, I think, when he died.
Fair enough.
Anyway, Stalin's death was publicised in the Soviet newspaper Pravda, which means truth. This is the best I could find. So that's the front page.
It's all in Russian.
Well, of course it is.
Can't read that then.
So I had to translate it with a book. It's something along the lines of, from the Central Commissariat of Communist Party.
He's dead. Basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's what it says.
It says from who it's basically it's from the political party, and it's to the members of the USSR.
People's
Exactly.
Republic of China.
No, it's the Soviet
Russian
Union.
Republic of China.
Soviet Union.
Whatever. I can't hide.
No. Anyway, so let's start with the circumstances that led up to his death. February the 28th, 1953. Stalin's last evening meal. After a night of shouting, heavy drinking and one-upmanship, the guests left. The night ended rather strangely.
So we had a house party.
Basically, yeah. Almost every night of the week.
One-upmanship.
Stalin used to get all of his party members drunk. And as we'll hear a bit later on, he used to listen for traitorous remarks, that kind of stuff. Good way of doing it, really.
What, he stayed sober?
Yeah.
Teetotal.
Well, no, probably not.
Everyone else
he
got
used to
hammered.
drink as well. He used to eat. He's a big bloke, wasn't he? At 6 a.m. the following morning, a new security guard named Khrushchev emerged from Stalin's room with orders for the remaining security detail, instructing them to go to bed. This is an order that only Khrushchev heard and was not verified by anyone else present. This is a situation that had not occurred before. So he's in his bed, this guy comes out and says to the other guards that are wandering around, go to bed, basically, I don't need you. Which is unheard of. He's never given that order before. And no one else but this guy heard it. Without further orders, the security detail didn't dare disturb him because they'd be severely punished if they went in there without him summoning them.
Could be doing anything, couldn't he?
Anyway, without further orders, they didn't go in.
Sorry.
I mean,
Did it make you jump?
I was mid-sentence.
Yeah.
12 hours passed, At 6:30 p.m, the light in Stalin's bedroom inexplicably came on, but still he did not come out of the room. Without further orders, the security detail on duty did not dare disturb him, and another 3.5 hours more went past. At 10 p.m. on the night of March 1st, the post arrived, and this finally gave the guards a legitimate excuse to disturb Stalin. On entering the room, the guards found him on the floor, apparently in distress, and in a pool of his own urine. Others arrived in due course, and the guards were told not to inform anyone, nor to answer the telephones. So, one guy goes in, and he found Stalin on the floor near the nightstand with one arm out, kind of like that. And he was in a pool of his own urine.
Oh, he weren't planking or anything like that.
He was on the floor. He was in
Pool
distress.
of his own urine.
Yeah, he'd wet himself on the floor like that, going.
Been drinking, isn't he? No.
Others arrived in due course because he went to get them.
Take pictures. No.
He's just sort of laying there like,
Hammered.
yeah. The guards were told not to inform anyone, nor to answer the telephones.
What about him weeing himself?
About him being on the floor.
Oh, okay. What in case somebody rang and asked?
As Stalin pissed himself. Bit of a specific question.
Stalin on the floor.
You don't piss.
Yeah.
No. At 3 a.m. on March 2nd, Lavrenti Beria, the chief of the secret police, arrived to visit Stalin in the room with a comrade, Georgi Malenkov. By this point, the security guards had moved Stalin from the floor to a nearby couch. Beria remarked that there was nothing to see, he's just sleeping, and promptly left. Away from the dacha, an order was sent through the command networks of the Politburo, requiring that the preparations that were being made in the Jewish doctor's plot were to halt. It's not known for sure who gave this order, but it is strongly suggested to have come from either Beria or one of his immediate subordinates, perhaps at his suggestion. So the doctor's plot was, it was an imagination of Stalin. He was very suspicious of everyone around him and everyone in his party and his political rivals. He conducted a lot of purges, killed lots of people. Beria was the main guy that was doing it, really. He went around taking people off the streets and torturing them and all that shit. So the image that you get in your head of people getting kidnapped and tied to a chair and lighters put on their nipples or whatever.
One of Stalin's parties.
The image that's conjured is pretty much what happened. That's how they got information out of people. He started to think that all the Jewish doctors in the country and the intellectuals were against him and plotting to overthrow him. And it's important because there weren't any Jewish doctors, which were the best in the country, available to help him, because they were all imprisoned in gulags. Throughout the early morning of March 2nd, Stalin remained comatose on the sofa, yet no doctors had been called for. By dawn, the guards had again contacted Beria and urged him to bring medical help, which arrived later in the morning. These doctors and medical staff were new, never having been employed by Stalin or his colleagues before now, since the majority of the very best surgeons and doctors available were imprisoned at this time. Present in the room were Stalin's children, Svetlana and Vasily, with Beria, Vyacheslav Molotov, Nikita Khrushchev, and various security guards. While the doctors work, Beria spoke openly against the dictator, spitting at the floor and declaring his hatred and disgust of the man. Vasily shouted and berated the doctors for their apparent nervousness in treating their patient. Molotov, Svetlana and Khrushchev were relatively quiet, though Svetlana would occasionally recoil at seeing her father's suffering. So they're all in this room now, surrounding Stalin, who's obviously very ill or dying. No one knows what yet. And no one really knows what to do. The doctors are down there. They're saying things. Most of them don't understand what they're talking about. And Stalin is sort of wheezing and in and out of consciousness. Sweating. Knackered, basically. Hard night. During the brief periods in which Stalin apparently regained consciousness, Beria's attitude toward him dramatically changed. He would take his hand and kiss it, speaking softly of his bravery and paying salutations to his valiant comrade. Periodically, Stalin would regurgitate blood and would retch, though these details were suspiciously absent from his autopsy report and from the report in the newspaper Pravda, printed on the day following his death. Ultimately, Stalin suffered for 3 more days. At 9:50 p.m. in the evening on March 5th, he raised his arm and pointed a finger menacingly at those around him, then collapsed back down onto the couch, dead. The cause of death listed in the autopsy was death by cerebral hemorrhage caused by hypertension.
Blood pressure then, basically.
Yeah. To be fair, he was 74? So, it's possible. So that's what happened.
Oh.
He's puts his arm up, points at people in the room, and then just conks out on the gun. Dead. There was a report released in about 2004, which is very different from what was written in the newspaper. So we'll sort of compare those two now. Okay. And have a look at the information that was in the official autopsy report. Official records from the time that were released to the public state that death was indeed caused by cerebral hemorrhage. Little other information was published, or was written so as to be acknowledged, but associated with very much diminished levels of responsibility for his death. An excerpt from the official post-mortem reads, "Examination disclosed a large hemorrhage in the left hemisphere of the brain. This destroyed important areas and caused irreversible disorders of respiration and circulation. Besides the brain hemorrhaging, there was an established enlargement of the heart, numerous subsidiary hemorrhages, and anteriosclerotic changes in the blood vessels, especially in the brain." This report gives as much information as is necessary to explain the death, but it is by no means comprehensive, likely in an effort to protect the physicians involved in Stalin's treatment from further persecution. Additionally, the various subsidiary damages were much less consistent with hypertension than with the application of an anticoagulant agent, such as warfarin. This is to say, Stalin is likely to have ingested poison. You know what warfarin is? Like rat poison.
Well, yeah, but it's also used medically.
Yeah, for DVT and
It's a
heart
very, it's
problems.
medical. It's recognised as with medical benefits.
like a thinner, isn't it? Sometimes people that are pregnant use it. I couldn't get hold of an English copy of Pravda, so that was hard enough to find. So the primary cause of death that was put to the people was he died of cerebral hemorrhage.
Fair enough.
That's it. That's pretty much it. That was a report to the Ministry of the Interior. And this information comes from the new report, which again I couldn't get hold of. National Archives haven't got it.
The one that's from 2004.
Yeah. So it's information that's quite recent because they
You
opened
can't
up
get
some of
hold
the
of it.
archives. Well, no, you can't. I can't get it. I've looked everywhere online.
Can anyone else get it?
Can you?
If you can get hold of it, email us
Hit
or
me up.
whatever.
If you want. In the full unredacted report that was released in 2004 at the opening of various Soviet archives was contained the following notes. So evidence of cerebral hemorrhaging, which we already know about. Got that one. Mm-hmm. Evidence of gastrointestinal, renal and cardiovascular hemorrhaging. So intestine, tract, jejunum, colon, heart. Application of leeches.
They put leeches on him.
Well, yeah, obviously if the blood's really thin and bleeding is happening, he might have bled in the fall, perhaps.
Maybe.
Detection of weaker heartbeat, which again, if the blood's really thin, it would flow through the heart faster and it's not requiring as much effort to get it through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I had to look into that a bit, because I didn't really understand that. Enlarged liver, which is normally alcohol related, I thought.
He's partying, isn't he?
Living it.
That's why.
Party in the USSR.
That's why he pissed himself as well.
Yeah, loss of bladder control, which is actually in there. Cyanosis, do you know what that is?
Cyanosis? It's not nothing to do with cyanide, is it?
No, cyan, like the colour.
Oxygen levels?
Yeah, it's to do with oxygen. Blue hue to the skin. People that take warfarin medically,
They go
or other you get blue toe syndrome, that sort of stuff. This was much more widespread. It's a lack of oxygen in the red blood cells.
He looked like an avatar in the end. What else?
Alright. Apnea.
Apnea. I have heard of that.
It's to do with stopping breathing. So, or it's like the cessation of breathing. So normally it's associated with people that are overweight.
Is that something you have in your sleep sometimes? Can you have it in your sleep and you wake up and you feel your heart skipped a few beats or whatever?
Yeah, you stop breathing for a little bit and then you you jolt awake.
Could have been doing it on purpose.
Might have been. Excessive perspiration. Sweat.
Need some links. Depends where he lives, isn't it? Russia. So what are they of? Can't pronounce it.
Loss of bladder control, which you mentioned earlier. Pissed himself. Evidence of lacunar infarction. You heard that?
Isn't that a West End show?
Cellular necrosis in the lacuna region of the brain, which is near the hypothalamus.
Good.
It's same as cyanosis, really. It's oxygen starvation to the brain. But cellular necrosis is when the grey matter or whatever in your brain starts to die off, like a blackened rotten. So nasty. Happens elsewhere, but in the brain it would be
quite bad.
Grey matter, yeah. Evidence of the administering of carbogen, gas and air in it.
Fair enough.
Including artificial respiration as well, towards the end. But like artificial ventilation, like a machine breathing, iron lung, I suppose. And the regurgitation of blood, which we mentioned earlier. So all of that was in the report that came out in sort of 2004 and wasn't mentioned in the newspaper. So all of this is new information.
All right.
Which, with the exception of perhaps loss of bladder control, weaker heartbeat, and the hemorrhaging in the brain, all points to something else being the cause of death.
The pie.
Maybe. So widespread hemorrhage, use of leeches, vomiting of blood, and cyanosis.
Go on.
No thanks.
Hold on.
You ready? Really sensitive microphone.
Mouthy.
Widespread hemorrhage, use of leeches, vomiting of blood, and cyanosis are all associated side effects of warfarin overdose. Warfarin itself had been patented in the early 1940s and had just become available in Russia at the time of Stalin's death. Warfarin is colourless and tasteless, often in a crystalline soluble form, and can be mixed with any liquid or foodstuff with ease.
So we're thinking he was poisoning them?
That's the direction it's headed in.
I hope.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just some geezer that died and pissed himself. It's not a mystery whatsoever. I forgot who we're talking about at the minute. Some Russian.
Stalin.
That's the one.
Just pissed himself and died. Warfarin had been patented in the early 1940s and had just become available in Russia at the time of Stalin's death. Warfarin is colourless and tasteless, and it comes in a crystalline, like soluble form, and can be mixed with any liquor or foodstuff with ease.
Colourful and tasteless.
Colourless.
Colourless and tasteless.
Yeah, so it's like a transparent, or translucent, I suppose. Crystalline compound. So that's what... You hungry or something? Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what the autopsy came out with, which was entirely new information. So there's been a few books that have been written on it.
So why was there an autopsy done in 2004? What happened?
No, there was a report done at the time, a proper report, a proper autopsy done. This is all from...
So at the time they did a proper one?
Yeah.
Why did they go back and look at it again in 2004?
it wasn't looked at again. It was released as a part of a collection of documents in an old archive.
So the information already existed in the original autopsy, they just didn't release it?
Yeah, it was redacted then. They only gave enough information to the people to say that he's died.
Right.
He died of a hemorrhage. He was old. There was the mandatory mourning period. I showed you the pictures of the streets filled with people.
Yeah, it looked like someone had died.
The report
Facts
was compiled.
held back?
Yeah. There was a bit of a vacuum politically after he died, obviously. Initially, Beria and Malenkov, the guy who came with him, they seized power for a while, but it didn't end particularly well for him. So we'll get into that a bit later on.
Okay.
So that's how he died. And that's what the autopsy said. Essentially two separate stories. You've got what was told to the public at the time, and you've got what has now been revealed now that the archive file that this was in has been opened up. It took people quite a long time to find it as well. There was a lot of research that went into it. But obviously the notion that he was potentially poisoned changes things a little bit, because it means that he was removed from power, in essence.
Yeah. Well, yeah, poisoned him.
Well, there's no shortage of suspects. There are 5 that we're going to look into, which we will do in our next episode, in part 2 of The Unexplained Death of Joseph Stalin.
Two-parter?
Two-parter. Instagram down here in case you want to catch up with us. In the meantime, just check the comments are down there. Yeah, good. Leave a comment if you want. Tell us what you think.
Like, follow, subscribe.
He owned that. So join us for part 2, where we will discuss the suspects and potentially some motives. And we'll see you there.